Okay, a rare resource. Well, I'll stand. So I really love having this opportunity to say a few words and kind of frame what I'd like to talk about. And then I'd love to get your questions and kind of list them all and then figure out how to answer them. So it can really be interactive. We have an hour? Half hour?
Mm-hmm. 1 hour.
1 hour, that's what I thought. So a couple of things. I was asked to speak about just, what is it like to be a woman in Silicon Valley and in the ecosystem and now on the investor side, but I feel like I'm always an entrepreneur, so it's hard to ever give that up. And also to talk about funding. How do you go about getting access to capital? And I think that the second is probably of greater interest, and then we can pepper that with some of the challenges that are sometimes additionally challenging when you're a woman in the ecosystem, where we're still outnumbered on all sides, it seems, but we're getting better. Not better in quality. We were always there in quality, in number. So just on the subject of women and investing, I think I had my first rude awakening when I left my corporate career thinking, I'm going to go be the leader I want others to be. And where else can you do that but in Silicon Valley? It's a meritocracy. And I think it's probably one of the best meritocracies around, but it's still a club. And it's has its own set of rules, and you have to kind of figure them out and navigate them, and then do your best to create a huge success. So I think that one of the things that I've found really interesting is, as a woman in this meritocracy system, there are people that understand that you've got some additional challenges. There are still some people around that don't think there's any issue, even women. And I was told recently by a 27-year-old woman that we invested in, she actually shared with me the other day, she said, so many of my colleagues don't think there's any issue. And she said, and I said, really, you're kidding, how and why? What's been their experience? And she said, maybe it's because when you're fresh out of school and you're an associate somewhere, you see equal numbers of men and women in these associate jobs. And you think, that's great, I'm being treated equally. And it's not until a few years later, that was like their experience, where you start to work your way up that you start to see, wait a minute, why aren't I getting that same opportunity? But I think we have a different dynamic when you're out on your own as an entrepreneur, because you don't have a hierarchy. You're not in a structure. So it's harder to see, and it's harder to understand the rules of the game, because the biases are more incipient, and they're often not even known to the men. So a good example of that, I was asked to speak at a VC task force group meeting one night. I hope you're all aware of that organization. You can do pitches, and it's quite interesting. And I've seen companies pitch and get access to capital right then and there. Not that people write checks right then and there, but get appointments. It's quite powerful. And when I was asked to come and serve as a judge the very first time, a man who is now a good friend, but he called me up and he said, well, I don't understand why we would have you come to this group, because you only invest in women. I want to work with people who don't discriminate. And so thankfully I was quick on my feet, and I said, you know what, that is great, because we hope that everybody feels the same way you do. In fact, all we ask is that there be at least one woman on the team with at least a 10% equity position. She doesn't even have to be the CEO. We just want her to have a 10% equity position. And that fits our screen of companies. That's all we're looking for. And I would think that should be every single company. Then we wouldn't have a reason to be stating that we're here looking for companies with women as in leadership positions. It would be all companies, because don't you want diversity on your team, gender and ethnicity, and we all know that people make better decisions when there's diversity. To this man's credit, he said, that's interesting. Never thought of that, really. I didn't realize that. And so not only did he become a friend, he actually became a member of Golden Seeds. Very interesting. So, but I bring it up because that was only maybe 3 years ago. And here's this extremely bright, well-educated man, immersed in the ecosystem, completely unaware of his own bias. And so I think that's an example. Now, he surely goes around and doesn't say, gee, let's exclude this company because there's a woman involved. In fact, he sends them our way. But he didn't think there was a problem. So it's, so I think you face very different kinds of challenges. And what we've found as Golden Seeds, when often people will come to us and they'll say, wow, that was so cool, presenting to a room full of women and a few good men. They'll say it was so different. And then we'll say, well, why? What was it? Why was it different? And there was a sense that they could focus completely on the content of the presentation and not be judged in any other way. And that if the subject of their company had anything to do with gender, maybe it has something to do with women's health. We've had two interesting women's health companies. One was actually run by a man, had to do with fetal monitoring, and he couldn't get traction. And we thought, well, maybe there aren't enough men that relate to the problem. So sometimes it's finding a good audience where people relate to the problem and get it. And we found this with a company we invested in the women's health area. It had to do with female infertility and then ovarian cancer detection. And people really got it. And most of the backers, in fact, I think all of the board members are women of that company. So even within the venture financing that person got, there were women really rising to the challenge and the opportunity to back this company. So, so I think that we're, if there's any question, the nature of the firm, sometimes cool design companies might get a better read from an audience where there are more women in the group. So that's a plus. Then on the opposite side, something a few of us were talking about earlier, I think one of the interesting phenomena that is worth just putting out there is I think we tend to be pretty rigorous, analytical, thorough, and that's good and bad. And one of the things we're finding as a group is that we kind of are known for our diligence. So amongst angel groups, that's positive because they'll say, oh, you're leading that? Could we syndicate with you? And, that's happening with people across the country. So that's kind of cool. But what we're trying to get better and better at is figuring out how do we do the kind of diligence where we feel we need to without holding up the entrepreneur. Because everybody wants to move quickly and we don't want to lose out on opportunities. So it's, how do you synchronize the needs on the investment side with the needs of the entrepreneur? And that's something that we're really working on. So I guess last I would say in the gender area is that we're, like every group, we're also looking for an ecosystem because we're just, I want to say, just that first stage. We actually also do Series B, and we have a really good track record of doing our follow-on round, so we stay with our companies through their life cycle, and we certainly plan on that. But as you know, it's and part of the challenge here when you think about raising money, it's figuring out who is likely to be there for your next round and the one after that, and who's going to lead it. And I think one of the things that we're still, even though we've been around since 2006, I think, we're trying to figure out, well, who are the people within the broader venture community that we should be aligned with to really keep growing the values. And, you know, the big dream is to have a big private equity company someday. So, you know, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're focusing on helping women get access to capital, create wealth, create an ability to do more in the world. But if we do all this great stuff and we all want exits, and then you exit to a company that just chews you up, and then what? We haven't really accomplished much. We've made a big ripple, but we'd like to boil the ocean. They say don't boil the ocean, but we really want to do more than just play at that level. It's great, it's wonderful, we know it's serving a need, but we really want to do more. So we're trying to figure out how do we participate in that broader ecosystem as well. So that's kind of the framework. And then I wanted to say, in thinking about the key aspects around raising money, I'm happy to talk about everything from the mechanics, of which there are a zillion, and the gotchas and all of that. But I think one of the things that really just occurred to me in the last few days as I was just in the background mode thinking about what would really be the key points, for advice. I think what people forget and what they're kind of missing in thinking about raising capital is you really need to think of it as a campaign. If you're running for public office, what do? If you're going to do a big marketing campaign, or another analogy would be, let's say you're the head of sales for a company and you've got your quota for the year. And you know you've got 365 days, you have to hit this huge target, and how are you going to do it? And you don't just go out and say, I'm going to call on this company, oh, this one looks big, let's go there. And the next thing you know, you're out of time and you've missed your target. And so it's really about, I think before you get into the details, it's about figuring out, here's my framework, how much money do I think I'm going to need? Am I building a capital-intensive business? Mm-hmm. Am I going to manufacture? Or am I going to build a software platform? And even that, answering that question, dictates how you think about what money you need initially and how you're going to get to the full, expression, the full capacity in order to get to cash flow positive. Are you building something that you could bootstrap and bootstrap considerably? So I really think it's first think about that framework. And in that context, there's a whole process around validating, where, you've got to, nobody wants to see a pitch until they know you've really validated the idea. And nobody wants to fund market research. They want that to be done before you get in front of an investor, because it can be done today so inexpensively. And then part of validation is having an advisory board. And, you often think, well, I'll get that later. But a really very good friend of mine, a few years ago, I actually showed her somebody's executive summary that I was quite intrigued with. And this friend said, I said, what do you think of this? She said, where's their advisory board? I said, well, come on. I mean, they're just getting off the ground. And the person said, I'll never forget this. They said, why would I put money into a company that no one who knows the market, the space, is even willing to put their name, time, and reputation behind? I thought, oh, good point. It needs to come early in the process and is part of the validation. And so it doesn't have to be a formal board, but thinking about key advisors who you can start to tap and who will also end up being references for you when you do talk to investors. So again, I kind of think about all those things that validate you, your idea. You've got it really pretty well scoped. And then the second kind of key thing under this umbrella, this framework, I would call just qualify. Qualify, qualify, qualify. Just like when you're in sales, you're qualifying the opportunity, or you're qualifying the customer. How do you qualify the investor? What are they like? What's the VC fund like? What's the angel group like? What are they going to expect of you after you get the money? What kinds of companies do they invest in? What time frame do they take? And by the way, I really think all of that thought process around framework needs to be in the context of at least 6 months out. People kind of think, well, I'll come in and I have 2 weeks left. Come on, I've got 200K left in my $1 million round. You might get a few people who say okay, but you really won't get the kind of depth and quality, I think, that you want. And you won't know who's putting the money in either. And if that's so important. It has to be a two-way street. So then I would say the third kind of key thing is something that I've really appreciated now more sitting on this side of the fence, and that's momentum. The power of momentum. And that is actually, thinking about that caused me again to think about a campaign, political campaign, or anything that you're really trying to make happen and pull lots of loose ends together. Once you step out and talk to that first, if it's an angel group, trust me, the word is out. Within a month, everybody knows who's pitching to everybody. And so somebody has a friend in some group, they share, And the next thing you know, you want it to be positive. So if you pitch to Harvard Angels, let's say, and somebody there says, "You seen this company yet?" We might say, "Oh no, what'd you think?" "Oh yeah, well we should encourage them to apply." And we see the company. I don't know. What about this? It's all this undercurrent of conversation, and you want it to be, yes, and we think this, maybe they're a little early, but we're looking at X, we gave them this feedback. You want to be ready and able to take the feedback, crank out another milestone, and then let the word get back that you're hitting those milestones. And get that positive buzz going. And that really relates to the fourth key thing, and last, which is execution. And it's all about execution at the end of the day. And, there are times when I used to think, and still do occasionally, why does the game of venture capital have to be so rough and tough? It's like, there are things that you see and you hear and you're like, can't we be kinder and gentler to entrepreneurs? And I've been there. I've been on that side, as you said, with your challenge and your exit. And I used to think, we've got to figure that out because entrepreneurship is the lifeblood of our economy, and it's what we stand for, and we're like the best in the world at it. And yet we seem to have this system of finance that is less than pristine. How's that? So that how do we work on that? How can we have values with every investor that, there's a little more transparency and etc. So, and you know what I've realized is that at the end of the day, if the company, I'm not saying it's the entrepreneur's fault because I've been there too, but you don't have the difficult challenges with capital if you're executing on the milestones. In fact, you're in the driver's seat and you're the one deciding, do I take in more money or not? And you dictate the terms. And dictate's a strong word, but you are saying, hey, I think my company's worth X, and you're out there and you're an attractive investment opportunity. So the problem comes, and when the sharp teeth come out, it's really a function of something's happened. And it doesn't mean it was your fault. It could be a fire in literally, we saw that recently, in your manufacturing facility. It literally happened. It could be, you were doing something over in China and unbeknownst to you, you had a major failure. It could be that you're early in a brand new market and all your best expectations just didn't happen, and now you're going to need way more money than you thought, much sooner. Nobody's going to be happy with that. So that's when the tough side comes out. And I think at the end of the day, it really is that blend of figuring out how do you think about raising money such that with every round you know the milestones you want to achieve. So if you're going to have angel money, you want to be able to think in advance. With this money, whether it's $500,000, $1 million, I'm going to do X. Because with X as my milestone, I know I've really de-risked the company for the next round of capital. And if I were to draw a picture, it's really, the whole process is about super high risk, and at each stage, reducing that risk so that the investor at each stage pays more for the equity at each stage because it's worth more. Company is worth more. So if you can think in terms of de-risking, and what de-risks something is validation, customers, revenue, technology build out, so the big major milestones, and then if you kind of did your roadmap over the next 12 months, 12 to 18, and then you could back that into, here's the amount of money I need the first tranche. And somebody once said, well, I just want to raise $1 million because I don't want to spend the rest of my life raising money. So, and I remember saying, well, that's nice. So, but you're really going to hurt yourself because what's your company worth today when it's something on a piece of paper? So they said, well, what do you mean? Well, $1 million, if the company's worth, can you argue it's worth $1 million? It's just an idea. So you're going to give up half the company? Because if you take in $1 million, then it's $2 million post money. So, it really has to be chunked, and it's for everybody's benefit, in particular for yours, because you want to, keep as much equity as you can and raise the money as you need it to continue to increase the value, so that while you're diluted, you're still owning a high value piece. So that's, again, why it comes all about, at the end of the day, execution. And coming full circle, even executing in that first angel piece. So I think on that note, I'd love to get questions and then just start a dialogue. What's top of mind?
I don't know if it's top of my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, my name is Hanan. I came from Jordan in Tech Women program. And I'm a founder for a company for real estate. It's like Zello.com here.
Yeah.
And we're implementing that in the Middle East. My question...
Are the prices higher?
Yeah, not that much. First, I wanted to drop a comment. We are an incubator. We are in an incubator that has 63 companies. More than 50% of them are founders of women. So this is good news. So it's rising up over there.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Now my question
Wow.
to you is about the diversity of plans according to the amount invested. For example, sometimes I say to the investors, if you give me 500K, I will do this plan A. If you give me $1 million, I will do that. If you give me 10 million, I will do another thing. So do you think this is a normal sign, or what's your advice regarding that? And question number 2, to make it short, regarding the advisory that you mentioned, also sometimes when I pitch, I say that some of the amount that I will be getting will be for hiring advisors to be part of the company. So do you think this is what you mentioned about the advisory? Is it good to hire advisors once we get an investment, especially that we are in the scaling stage from a small company to a big company?
Okay, so first question of with 500 I'll do X and $1 million I'll do Y and 10 million Z. I think you can have a range, but you really want to not have such a big range. And the reason is, I think what you want to be able to convey to an investor is that you've really thought it through, and that you know that with X dollars you can deliver Y. And that's really what you want. You want to get X dollars and deliver Y, and then have them be thrilled and be ready to participate in the next round with you. And if you're that all over the map, what that does is it affects really your percentage ownership. It starts to cause people to think, well, gee, one of the things people are going to want to understand is the valuation of the company. So that's why it has a kind of a natural delimiter on the raise. I mean, a natural delimiter on the raise is based on valuation. Does that make sense? So I think I've definitely seen different plans, and I've seen people morph where they first started talking about, gee, I just want to raise 500K in a convertible note, kind of classic thing. And then start to realize over a period of a few months that they're really onto a much bigger opportunity than they thought, and that they really should raise more and price around and just go for it. Because they started out thinking they were this kind of company, and they're now doing big back-end analytics in a healthcare space, the one I'm thinking about at the moment. And so they've been shifting over to a much bigger raise. But that's part of just naturally kind of feeling your way into a market and discovering through that validation process that, you're really onto something and you don't want to shortchange yourself. But I think if you're clear that, what you're building, and you can get a proof point at 500K, I would stick with that. Like maybe 500 to 700, and you could say with 700 I'll have a little more for this marketing or whatever. That's fine. And then you can also structure things so you have a first close. So you might say, look, I'd like to raise $1 million, but with 500K, I can at least get to here. So I'm gonna structure this so I'll have a first closing of the money, which means you can start using it at 500K. And then you can still be open to taking in more without necessarily spending all of your time trying to raise that second piece. But those are kind of some nuances. But on the issue of paying advisors, typically an advisor wouldn't be somebody that's ready to join the company. And typically, at least here, in our environment, they would have a percentage of the company, small, but like 0.25% vesting over 2 years. Does that sound about right? Maybe.
Depends on what
What
they're
they're
doing,
doing,
how
yeah.
often, you know.
Because a board position might be 1% over 4 years. That kind of depends on the stage. But yeah, I think, I wouldn't think of paying advisors. I would think in terms of talented people that once you raise the money, you'll bring them in as a full-time person or part-time. But yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I had a question kind of following up on that idea of maybe it's 500K now, and
Right.
here's what I want to go to. Is there, it might be different for different types of products or services, but in terms of the time frame that goes with that, is there sort of a standard within a year you would do this, or 6 months, or?
Yeah, good question. Very good question, because you really want to have enough money to run for 9 months to a year.
Okay.
6 months is really short, and everybody knows that bat of an eye, you're going to close that money and then oops, you're out.
Yeah.
And nobody wants you to be out of money and not have accomplished the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I would try to look at milestone and time frame. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
So 9 to 12 is sort of a
Yeah.
first big.
Yeah. 9 months is probably okay when initially it's early, but you don't want to go shorter than that. Time flies too fast.
With income groups in general, I guess what's the perception of of solopreneurs, and what are the levers that you'd have to see being raised within a solopreneurship that would, as an angel, make you still attractive as opposed to bringing a team on board, and maybe even the question might be phrased as, is it better to come forward for funding as a newer team, or as a very pared down solopreneur who's looking to build a team that has some traction?
Okay, I would say definitely the former, the team. And the reason is a sole entrepreneur has to have lots of key man insurance. We need key woman insurance.
Key person insurance.
Yes, key person insurance. But it's a little risky. Everything's banking on that one person, and they get sick or lose interest. I think people definitely invest in teams, and they love to have teams that have worked together. So that's, again, it's simply, when you think about it, it says, oh, one less risk. They know each other, they've been through thick and thin, and they're back together working on another company. So that's the ideal. If that isn't the way you want to go, I would think about maybe approaching individuals. So think about friends and family more, and then maybe 1 or 2 angels. Because if you don't have a team, by definition, you're going to need less money. Actually, I had to stop myself because I know of one that was doing an outsourced model, which is pretty powerful. But they definitely had a team. It's just that they weren't all employees. So, yeah. Welcome. Yeah. Oh, good. Roger.
Hi, Gwen. I'm Haiti with Cohabit.
Oh yeah,
Startup
yeah, look
Weekend.
familiar. Yeah.
Golden City sponsored the Startup Weekend, which is great. I had a question that was on a piggyback on the team. So there's, I had a question, a specific question about bringing in, expanding the team, and the trying hard not to get tripped up on co-founder title and what that means, and when it comes down to like the equity sharing, I went online and Googled, questions about this, and I'm asking the question because the answers are just polar opposite. It's either like, don't you ever do this, or you've always got to do this, and it's about the exact same thing. And so if we're bringing somebody else on, to make it specific, if we're bringing on a third person who would be a developer because we really need development, my opinion is, it depends on the person whether they want to be a partner, whether they're strategic that way, whether they want to be considered that. Separate and apart from that is the kind of equity, because right now we need sweat equity, and so we would want them to be a part of that team. Any kind of guidelines on how to think about bringing people on?
Well, the most important thing I would think about is vest.
Got it.
Like whatever you do,
Right.
it's not earned on day one, and then you're safe.
Okay.
Because if you get divorced, the person fairly earns what they vested. With somebody like a key position, like a developer, I personally would not do a 1-year cliff. I know I'm looking at Roger, I know that's normal.
If it's sweat equity?
But if it's sweat equity, I let them vest monthly. Just come on in, and here's your position, and every month you're here, you're earning the equity. I actually feel that way with some other key positions, even like a key business development or a key sales, because that person's going to bring their Rolodex, they're going to bring value, and if they leave after 6 or 7 or 8 months, I think they should earn for what they've done. So, but once you're really up and running and you're bringing on employees with stock options, I think the 1-year cliff makes sense, because you don't want tons of people with their equity, hanging out there that you've got to be taking care of and worrying about for the rest of the life of the company, getting shareholder approval and all the things. So, so I think really I just think about, and I wouldn't worry about whether it's a founder's title or not. It's really about non-option equity that vests. And then once you have an option pool, then that's different. That has a price. And
Sure.
Yeah.
And is there any range that you just comment in terms of people bringing on? Is it from 10 to 30? Is it any kind of guidance there? Or is it just that specific to the company and situation?
Yeah, I think you really have to look at the stage. I mean, if it's really early stage and it's a key position and this is your key developer position, I'd probably be more generous than not. I mean, later on, again, if you think about, your question isn't for later on. It's early. So, I would try to look at what you think the company is worth, what you think you're going to raise money at on a pre-money valuation, and then you can kind of mentally back into it. So that way you'd say, gee, we're going to, as soon as we raise that money, our valuation's going to be X post-money. Let's say you're going to raise $500,000, so you're going to be $2 million or whatever. Then what seems fair to offer that person so they get something monetarily relevant on $2 million?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Roger, you had a question
Yeah,
or a comment.
Yeah, I get the vesting question all the time. How big, how much, how long?
Yeah.
And I always say to my founders, you should look at any point in time, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and say, if that individual walks away, quits, or is fired, the percentage that they take away, will that percentage be commensurate with the value that they've added?
Exactly.
If at any point in time it's out of balance, you are in a situation that really will affect your upside.
Exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
for that particular situation, if there's more than one founder, I draw the distinction between founders and early employees because they're not necessarily all going to be treated the same. So, if you've got 3 or 4 founders already, and the primary founder who really needs to have certain percentage to set the direction of the company, gets diluted to the point where they lose that.
Right.
I think that's the issue in that particular situation that you really need to be aware of. And one of the things that I do with part-time people, if there are those that are the pig, they're committed, and there are those that have got 1 foot in, I'll do like an 8-year vesting, and then when they come in full-time, a catch-up so that they can catch up. But it's sort of inequitable if somebody's committed and someone else has got a full-time gig, that they're vesting on the same schedule, again, because it should be commensurate with the effort and the value that they provided. But I think my question was that I get all the time, and I thought maybe some of the folks here would have the same question, is, I say you have to raise money at inflection points, which is what you're saying, de-risking.
Yeah.
And then, we look at the different inflection points and we get to traction. And then I get the question, what is traction? How many users do I have to have? What constitutes traction? And I think, the best I can do is to say, it's not necessarily about the numbers, it's about demonstrating market fit. And so if you've demonstrated that market fit, whether it's 10,000 or 5 million, whatever it is, but is there, from your experience, I mean, if someone said to you, Gwen, what is traction? In the internet.
Yeah, so I would say if it's eyeballs, because you've got an advertiser model, which we still have people building, it's got to be millions of hits, and then you've got to have a reasonable conversion rate. So it's big. That's pretty significant. If it's a consumer company, consumer goods, like food, consumables, anything that's completely dependent on distribution to be successful, we actually have kind of an unstated view that a company needs to have $1 million in revenue before we want to fund it. And you'd say, but wait a minute, you're an early stage company. Investing. But one of our more seasoned in that sector, I come out of the tech sector, not consumer goods, but one of the more seasoned investors said, Gwen, I know you're in love with company X, but let's face it, where's the IP? And at the end of the day, it's market share, and at the end of the day, it's distribution. So if they, the company has to prove that they can get in the right doors, and then it makes sense to try to grow. But so those are a couple of examples. Enterprise used to be really clear. Now it's less so because everything's more subscription cloud-based. But so is the risk is lower too. But I think, what we would look at typically is there's a company right now where we're really close to finalizing on a term sheet as the lead investor, and it's a really big deal that's been in progress a long time. But in that case, we're looking at major Fortune 500 companies that are validating, that are saying, yeah, we really need this, here's why, here's what we're thinking. And it's a pretty disruptive technology play. So that really isn't even customers yet. But it depends so much on the company, the sector. Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have a group that you recommend if you need physical prototypes? I guess I'm afraid of kind of the Zuckerberg effect. I don't want to take my idea to someone and have them develop it on their own without me.
Yeah. There are a couple. There's a really interesting company called PCH. I don't know if you know them. They manufacture in China, but they're here. They're based here. That's kind of interesting. They're Ammunition. Do you know them? They're another company. They're here in the city. They'll do really interesting prototypes. Those really come to mind. And then the other thing I'd have to go do a little bit of research on, but it's so cool is this whole 3D printing. And just, I don't know what you're planning to build, but...
To the tech shop.
A what?
So go to the tech shop?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there are ways to work in that sector. It's just, it's evolving so fast. I mean, like monthly. So I would check that out.
There's a company called Sculptio that you basically send them your electronic design and they send you back the product.
Okay. Sculptio?
Sculpteo.
I put my phone down somewhere and I'm not looking at the time. I just want to make sure we're not overtaxing anyone's time. Are we getting close to 8 o'clock? Okay. Time for another question?
Sure.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Early on when you were talking about how there was the club and there were specific rules that you needed to learn to navigate.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if you could get specific on this. I want to understand that.
Let's see. So I think, first of all, I would kind of map out the different funds, kind of who's who, in terms of venture funds. And I would think about when you're, really figure out who you want to pitch. And not just who comes after you, but map out, why would this company be great? This venture firm or angel group, but really map that out. And then I think it's really worth the time to find the right people and start to vet. And because what happens is, I'll tell you the worst thing to do is to get enamored by one VC and what we call single thread the deal. Because they'll, make it sound like it's a plot, but, they'll keep you so busy answering. I mean, I don't mean that it's a plot. We'll do the same thing because we want to get all this information, but you'll end up being consumed focusing on one deal, one VC that has charmed you. And then at the end of the day, you get the term sheet and it's way off from what you thought. And you are in deep trouble. Deep, deep trouble. So that's one thing that I've seen personally happen, which was heartbreaking because we kept saying, watch out. And then here's a club story. The particular VC is very well known in the Valley and highly, highly respected. And when I saw what they did to this company and the term sheet, I got so mad. I called a very good friend of mine who's been an investor in the Valley for a long time and who's semi-retired. And I said, you got to help me. I mean, this is unbelievable. I said, we have got to help me find just a few people. We've got to pull together some funding for this company. We as Golden Seeds were already invested. And I said, this is just horrible. This has got to be a huge opportunity for the right set of players. And you know what this person told me? Oh, Gwen, nobody will go up against so-and-so. they wouldn't dare now counter and risk being wrong. Because what if the company failed? They don't want to be, have this guy who's the big banana say, oh, wow, aren't you stupid? So it's like, oh, sorry, that's now tainted. I couldn't believe it.
They're more risk averse than their entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, no, I don't. If you hear it, you think, wow, really? Because I thought, oh, how cool. Get some rabble-rousing VCs. Let's go and prove that guy isn't as smart as he thinks. Because I have unbelievable faith in this company. But anyway, it was almost a disaster. We ended up being able to get money in a bridge loan. And then the company had some great traction. And we were able to pull together, 4 months later, a reasonable round, but they had to reopen at the last price. They didn't want to do it. And the board approved, refreshing the option pool so the original team wasn't harmed too much. But, that's an example. That was really eye-opening. So, and then I think you can actually, while you're in a situation where you've been financed and you've got your board, I think actually, maybe it's even independent of that, I think we still have a little bit of the Cinderella complex. I mean, we think that the guys around the table are going to rescue us. Do you think I'm right about that? I mean, there's something about, I guess I've seen myself around a table saying, wait a minute, wake up! And I watch this dynamic, and it's between the man and the woman, as though this guy is going to be the sugar daddy and save the day. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You really think that's going to happen? That guy, you think that guy's your friend? No. Wake up. And then later, it plays out. And I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's male-female dynamic, but it's funny. It's a funny thing. I mean, we were talking about the queen bee syndrome. And I don't see that in the entrepreneurial world. I saw it in the corporate world. But so those are a couple of examples. But I think it's really about realizing that it is a club and everybody knows everybody. And so really just being careful with how you navigate. And if you really want your money to come from these 4 companies, you may not go there first. You may decide, I'm going to go talk to these 3 first and kind of practice and get some feedback. And you don't want to tell them you're practicing on them. But just kind of get a little comfortable with the pitch and then figure out how to get over here. So and then you just have to be, I think you really have to be, gosh, it's such a challenging blend of being strong and yet flexible. You've got to exude confidence and yet not be arrogant. It's all those things. And I think that's a little tougher even for a woman to walk that line. And because the expectations are mixed. And then, I think those are the main things.
I want to interject that we had a great phrase that I'll always remember by a founder today, and the founder can remain nameless, which was, I'm going to be fierce and I'm going to ask for help. I was like, wow.
That's it.
Right there.
That is it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for your time.